Welcome back, everyone, to another new episode of Grow Your Path to Wellness. If you missed our episode, so we're posting bi-weekly, but if you missed our last episode, we hosted Annie King, and she was very vulnerable, one of the first times she's been speaking on this topic. So we were very excited to have her and very grateful. So she shared, kind of her topic was sharing her journey, deconstructing a lifetime of faith and seeking authenticity and freedom. So make sure you go back, watch that if you missed that one. This week, we have another returning guest. We love when people return with new topics or build off topics. So Nick Angelis returns. And this week, we're going to be covering how to use insurance and self-pay options to help you get the most benefit along your healing journey, and kind of the best combination, or kind of I think there's a lot of preconceived, thoughts, expectations when it comes to using insurance and self-pay, and kind of we'll break those things down, and so you can figure out how to get the best benefit and bang for your buck whenever you are going through any type of wellness treatment. Welcome back, Nick. Thanks for joining with a new topic with us today.
Thanks for having me. And I really loved 2 weeks ago's episode. And so it's almost the same thing, what you were saying about the preconceptions of religion with Annie King. So today it's more like the preconceptions of healthcare. Like, what does it take for us to get better? How much is it worth? How much of our money is worth health? These sound like, it's supposed to be a practical episode, of course, but honestly, there's a lot of esoteric, value-driven conversations that no one really has in this country. Like, what is it worth to me to be healthy? Why am I giving up all of this money to not really be healthy? And what's the best way to figure that out? So we're really deconstructing healthcare.
I love that so much. And it's so, I appreciate the connection. That's so true. That's such a good, I don't know if the word analogy is right, but anyways, Nick, for people that didn't get to listen to our last episode, where we talked about psychedelic-assisted treatment.
Right.
So make sure you go back and watch that. We'll make sure that we tag that in the video here so you can watch that. Can you share who you are, what do you do, and why are you so passionate about this topic today?
Sure. So I'm the owner of Ascend Health Center. We're next door to you in Copley. We do mental health, a little bit of pain management. We have a lot of self-pay options and insurance-based options, especially for treatment-resistant conditions, depression, anxiety, complex regional pain syndromes, all those very complex, expensive disorders like migraines, fibromyalgia, where you go to multiple specialists. But my background as far as our topic today, I first became a nurse in 2004 in Cleveland Clinic's cardiothoracic ICU, which is probably the most expensive place you can be in as a patient because cardiac surgery. Then in 2008, I started a holistic business, which I had until about 2017. So no insurance there. In 2010, I became a nurse anesthetist after graduating from University of Akron. 2019, I started Ascend Health Center, where I am now. And the other interesting thing is about 2 years ago, I started working for a self-pay plastic surgeon. So I've kind of seen the gamut of self-pay, insurance-based, some sort of hybrid model. And it's all really confusing. That's how healthcare is. But trying to navigate that's really interesting. So yeah, that's my background. I'm a nurse anesthetist. So pain management and complex disorders and pharmacology, physiology, all that is my specialty.
And I think before we hit record, I don't think we were recording yet. Nick, you said this is a topic that, you get really passionate about, kind of fired up talking about. And as do I, and I know Amanda does too. So kind of in our practices, we both do 100% self-pay, and we acknowledge there'll be a lot of different conversation. It'll probably come up a lot here, but privilege of being able to do self-pay and accessibility of, being able to use that to your benefit. But because some people only have access, no insurance or access to. But I like what you said as far as the healthcare system is complicated. And I could get on a hope. So I will have a lot of soapboxes that I will not get on today, but firm believer that it's complicated on purpose. So
yeah, absolutely. And I think that's where patients especially have to start, with the realization that healthcare is not meant to be helpful.
Yes.
It's not meant to be easy. It's not meant to get you the care that you need. And so no matter what you're doing, you have to understand that, okay, I need to be persistent. And this is a strange idea, but you also have to be patient, because especially in a clinic like mine, which is not a community health clinic where we have to take anyone, we do have choices about whether to take you on as a patient. And it's unethical and illegal to say, well, this patient's Medicaid, we don't want them. Although another interesting fact is insurance companies break the law brazenly all the time. But I find it very ethical to be like, you know what, this patient's a pain in the butt. I don't want to extend all of my services to them. I don't want to have multiple interactions with them. And so as you're fighting for the care that you need, you have to remember in the back of your mind, well, look, if I'm being really annoying in this process, it could actually affect how much my provider wants to help. Because again, this is a very transparent podcast. Yeah. I'm just being honest that if a patient's grateful, I've like flown home 11 p.m., opened the clinic, helped somebody out. If they're obnoxious and annoying, and part of this is because I don't have the right personality for complete self-pay. I don't have a community like a smiling, but I don't mean it type of personality.
Yeah.
Then I will limit the services we can offer them. Because if we have to have a huge 10-minute conversation every time your insurance bills you for something, then obviously it's not worth my while to try to provide these services if it's going to be a fight to drag the money out of your wallet.
Yeah. And on the insurance side of things, it's a business. Our whole healthcare system is a business. And kind of a segue into our first topic here, like if you could, for our listeners, explain the concept of using a combination of self-pay and insurance to get your best, bang for your buck and best treatment.
Sure. So when you guys send me a patient, I tell them, let's not do ketamine infusions. It's going to be $300 out of pocket. And at some point, you're going to be, okay, so do I go to my therapist or do I do this infusion? And they really work best together. So instead I say, okay, here are some services that we can do for you that are based on your insurance. Spravato is a ketamine nasal spray. The whole concept of insurance healthcare is you have to come a lot and it doesn't cost that much, but it's a drag on your time. And the whole system is not meant to get you better. It's meant to keep you as a patient. So I'm very clear with like, okay, here's what we're going to do. Here's how we can limit the time you spend. But here's how we can also protect your wallet. Because if you're a very frugal person like me, often you spend your healthcare dollars in a way that doesn't help you because it's not quite enough of an investment to actually move the needle on whatever's wrong with you. So that's one angle. Like, okay, here's something I found that works. It costs me more money, but it works. It's going to cost me a lot more money to find something equal and have a lot of false starts. So that's one way is that, okay, this I'll do self-pay, this I'll do insurance-based. Another example is medicinal marijuana, where yeah, it can work for some people, but it's really expensive because there's so much trial and error. Oh, I got the wrong ratio, I got the wrong method. Oh wait, this dispensary didn't know what they were talking about. So you have to also think of the cost that it'll take to get you in rhythm with healthcare that works for you.
And I had a thought, Nick, as far as like, I don't know, maybe this is putting you on the spot, but like if you have patients that come to you, do you always recommend them calling their insurance first, asking what's covered, what's not covered, and any tips for people to navigate those types of phone calls? Because in my practice, like I can give them like super bill documents like that they can submit on their own to possibly get reimbursed, but I'm not responsible for the headache of that. But I do know that can be an overwhelming thing for people to just navigate like their own insurance and figuring out like, hey, what is covered? How do I know what I need to use self-pay for? What do I, what can I go through my insurance for? Basically?
So it depends because you're right. When we were talking about this topic first, I was like, well, yeah, but when we talk to insurance companies, it's typically a waste of our time. But when the member talks to their own insurance company, usually they get better answers. But there's some cases where I tell, again, I'm a really nice person, but I try to be very direct with these type of topics because insurance itself is so indirect. So I'll tell the patients, here's what you need to ask your insurance company. Here's what they'll lie to you about. Here's what is useful and what isn't useful. So like if there was a case where they're trying to decide between transcranial magnetic stimulation and Spravato. Both of them, you have to have failed 2 antidepressants and be really depressed for the insurance to pay for it. And I said, okay, here's what your insurance will do. They're like, well, we'll call. But I was like, no, you'll waste your time. And they called, and 8 hours later, like they had the wrong answer of what insurance would pay. I was like, these are very specialized procedures and you're talking to someone from another country who will say what's written on their computer screen, but it's not accurate. And in the end, there was a suicidal patient who did not get healthcare from us because they're so disappointed with like the whole interaction of trying to get things accepted. Then they were denied, and we we're trying to do another appeal. And so in that case, before we started, I said, no, you need to do ketamine infusions because by your personalities, you're going to get really frustrated by the speed of insurance and you will not get healthcare. And that's exactly what happened. So more and more I tell people like, no, here's how this works. And your insurance company will not understand this and you don't need to call them. But in other cases, like if they have a bill where it looks like their insurance company didn't pay for things, and I tell them, we can only charge you what the insurance company didn't pay. You need to talk to them and advocate for yourself before you come to us, and then we'll deal with it. And it's usually something like, look, you pay 75% of this bill, and then we'll start talking about, well, wait, what about this issue, or can we take off this item? That's more important with hospitals, where if you don't ask for an itemized bill, you'll get charged for like mucus removal devices. And it's like, it was a box of Kleenex. Why did you charge me $40 for a box of Kleenex?
Or skin to skin time for new moms or new birthing persons, right? Like what? And actually, speaking of, somewhere where you had mentioned, starting your career,
you're so boxed up.
They will not. I have very much tried itemized bills and saying, hey, this is the average rate according to this website that I was given that was so helpful. And they absolutely will not budge. So depending on where you go, they will or will not. And so let's dig into that more, because a lot of people, Kelsey and I are very active on social media. We both have our TikToks. And so and I know, Nick, you are also active on social. And so I'm not sure if you see this at all, but we get a lot of feedback, sharing, confusion, frustration from folks that say, hey, it's selfish of you to not take insurance. That limits access, right? And so I really wanted to dig in here and help the consumer, the patient, the client understand those unknowns about utilizing your insurance benefits. So if we can kind of dig into those,
Sure.
like reimbursement, differing reimbursement rates, and
Right.
denying claims, and the stress of billing, and all of those things. So can we kind of talk on that a little bit?
Yeah. So the hardest is the hybrid model, like what we use. Like I've tried 3 different times to have a massage therapist work for my practice. And each time I was like, well, wait, can't we bill this to insurance? You have a medical doctor. And we realized like, no, it's a lot of work. It doesn't really work. Is it even ethical? Because how can we say that this is exactly what the doctor prescribed, and then we have to go chase you down and collect $60 from you? That's so some of it's setting the expectation. Like at the plastic surgeon I work for, there's many cases where insurance will pay for a breast reduction. He's like, no, I'm not doing it. It's not nearly enough. It's not worth my time. I'm not devoting any time to anything even remotely insurance based. Do you want this done and you need this done? You'll pay me money, you'll come in for the surgery, and then you're done with it. So it is very complex. It is completely ethical to not take insurance because I pay a huge amount of administrative costs for billing insurance. I can offer super bills. I tend not to, just because I tell the patients, well, if we can't get money from your insurance, what do you think your chances are sending them a random bill? So I'm very upfront with like, and the other thing is insurance also varies on how good your insurance is. So this doesn't mean you need to get some top rate insurance. You spend a lot of money every month and still get ripped off. But I'm saying that like from insurance to insurance, the benefits, exactly what's covered, can be really complex. So honestly, a lot of insurance, even in 2022, is still my third party person in India or Bangladesh talking to the insurance company's third party person in India and Bangladesh, and then arguing with each other, and then maybe they'll bill you something. So even though it's supposed to be very high tech, it's very cumbersome. You should assume that there's a mistake on your bill and figure it out. So yeah, it's ugly. Now, a lot of this is us bashing healthcare in the US, and it's all great. But we have to remember, one reason that it's so expensive in the US instead of other countries, compared to other countries, is that in the US, if you come in with a heart attack, you'll get treated and they'll save your life and they'll figure it out. In other countries, including where my parents came from, Greece, if you fall in the cracks where you're not covered, they'll watch you die. And that's the end of that. So one reason is that we as a nation have decided that life is precious enough that it needs to be saved, even if it costs everybody a lot of money. So there's plenty of problems, but that is one reason. Like if you give the wrong address and the wrong information in the ER, they'll still treat you, even though they know that you're ripping them off. So that's part of like why it's so bad.
Yeah, and then like difference, the thing I wanted to share about like just from our perspective, like clinical social work therapists, that realm is that we go to school for, we get a master's degree. We pay lots of licensure and continuing education and testing, and then pay for our space and our practice. We pay for our cost of our electronic health records and our insurance, our liability insurance, and our practice, like our space, the insurance for our space, right? There's a lot of costs that people don't realize that we're paying. And if we decide to take insurance, Medicaid might give us $60 a session, right? I wouldn't, that's not going to pay my bills. That's not going to pay off my student loans, right? And Anthem or United Healthcare, depending on the year, the month, the person you get on the phone,
The cycle of the moon.
Right? You might get $75 a session. If you're working, Medicare, before I started my practice, I was, kind of in the transition, I was working in integrated care and doctor's offices for a Medicare-based program. You had to be an LISW. They would not take an LPCC or an IMFT, right? Same independent license, not same, but right, like independently licensed, right? And they won't bill for that. So I think that it's a challenge, when you're on the consumer end and you don't realize everything that's going in on the back end. I've also heard therapists that do take insurance, right? They bill claims, they get paid months and months and months and months later, or a year later, the insurance company will come back and say, oh, actually, we couldn't cover that and we're taking the money back.
Right. We get takebacks all the time for thousands of dollars.
Right.
And then they spill it on to the patient. Like, hey, that thing that happened a year ago? Well, it turns out you owe us $10,000 for it. So, yeah, which is embarrassing because the whole point of insurance is to reduce the risk of paying a bunch of money up front. So like I'm a pretty risky person by personality, so I don't have phone insurance. I try to have like cut rate car insurance, but my wife is in car insurance. She's like, no, that's not what we're doing here. So in other countries, like there's no home insurance. In Greece, if your home burns down, oops, you got to build another one. So we have to remember too that in the US, we've been taught, again, preconceptions, that everything must be insured, that we must pay a lot of money every month to companies that make a lot of money, which means that they're profiting from this and we're not, in order to prepare for any sort of casualty. Well, one lesson is like, well, maybe I won't buy the extra furniture or the nicer car, and I'll just have money so I don't have to waste it. So that's the challenge, is that like I don't have health insurance. I can easily get it, but I do so I do like a health share. It's called Christian Health Share Ministries. And of course, it's like, well, what if you're not a Christian? You don't believe in what they believe in? Well, that's fine. But what if you don't believe in what your healthcare company believes in, which is that we want to make 20% profits and make money off of people dying? So that is one thing. Another thing I do is also one of our neighbors, I don't know if you've met her or not, but Dr. Leslie in Fairlawn has Monarch Ideal Care, where it's like a subscription package. So for like $80 or $100 a month, if you have a problem, you just call them up. Because the problem with insurance-based care also is that the availability. We talk a lot about healthcare in Europe and how it's so much cheaper, but it's also like, yeah, we can see you next week on Tuesday. Oh, what time? No, just come into the office on Tuesday, and at some point on Tuesday you'll get seen. So depending on what your health needs are, and that's a big part of this conversation, like what's wrong with you and how easy can it be fixed? You may need some care exactly when you need it. Otherwise, things get a lot worse and you end up needing a lot more healthcare.
I think the other thing I wanted to say, I'm sorry, Kelsey. I think the other thing I just wanted to say was, that's another thing too. Yes, privilege comes into it. And there are some folks that just, even if they don't, have a nice phone or have a nice home or whatever it is, they're scraping just to get by and take care of their families. So Medicaid is their only choice. And we understand that. For folks that might have a little more wiggle room in your wallet, it really is about your value system and how you take charge of your own health, realizing, I think a lot of folks think that kind of like we already said, you know, that the health insurance is there to take care of us and protect us and keep us well. And it's not, and that's our responsibility. So if you really value your wellness, you're going to kind of make space for that. And I've just learned over the years that my health insurance doesn't care about me. They're not putting me first. They care about profit. And so I have to prioritize that. And so I think the thing I just wanted to say here is that providers like Kelsey and I know you do take a little insurance, Nick, but a lot of the providers that don't like strategically choose not to take insurance is because we come from a value system of preventative wellness. Right. And keeping you well and giving you the tools that keep you well rather than sick care, right? So that's just the point I wanted to make there.
Yeah, and go ahead.
I was just going to say, we always, Amanda and I, I think something that people don't understand as well on our front. I don't know how this looks for you, Nick. You can speak on that in your realm, but for us too, one of the biggest, this might be a whole topic for another day, but is people's right to confidentiality of their treatment, their healthcare. And like Amanda and I, this is why we click so well, because we're both, you know, always say you don't have to have a SMD, a severe diagnosis in order to get treatment, right? So like then you go into the whole ethical guidelines as far as diagnosing, and then I could go on and on about in and out of network and like, but there's a lot behind the scenes. And for me, I have some clients in military, or I have clients, you know, that work in specific professions, and I tell them, like, if you go through your insurance, there's these things that you need to be very informed that they will have access to, that will be on your record. Like, and then for them, they're like, oh yeah, nobody told me that. Or I have clients who are not minors, but they're on a family member's insurance, and they don't want family members to know that they're seeking mental health treatment. So there's the whole like confidentiality and your rights that we truly genuinely care about, not just, yeah, we have to pay our bills, but there's that component that I know Amanda and I consider as well.
That's such a good point, Kels. I know Nick wants to say something, and I just wanted to add something on the tail end. Like, if you watch any of the true crime documentaries lately that have been out, anything that happens, I don't care if you're getting a divorce, right? Anytime you are brought to court for any reason, they might subpoena your mental health records. And so if you go through insurance, those records are going to be handed over much more rapidly than if you go through a private practitioner that doesn't bill insurance, because we have our ethics, and we're not going to just say, oh yeah, here you go, here's an entire record of my client's life.
Right. No, absolutely. And we've gotten subpoenaed and asked for records, and usually we'll like fight until they give up, honestly, is how we treat it. But that's true, because for the TMS and Spravato that we do, it's F33.2, severe recurrent depression without psychotic symptoms. And if you can't show that on your PHQ-9 scores of how sad you are, which there's plenty of data that if you do too much of that, like, this is why I'm sad, you will get sadder, because so the whole system makes you worse. And we do a lot of disability, even though we don't like it even a little bit. And it's the same idea where if you get better, you'll lose these benefits. So, I mean, mental health is obviously your mind. And so there's these weird things at play where if you're getting worse, you might actually be able to access better treatment. Or when we have firefighters, celebrities, police, because, you know, the ketamine is a very good way to avoid Zoloft and Paxil and some of those other, and we tell them, like, no, you need to do this self-pay. We need to do this outside of your insurance. Like, this is the only way that you'll want to do this, because especially for police, like, if they have a lot of issues at work, they know that if something goes on the record of having a mental illness, that could really come back if there's any sort of controversial issue that happens. Because I know you've talked to Amanda a lot about police work and some of the ethics behind it. So their insurance is this driving force of like, well, wait, if I have this officer go to this training, it's really going to screw them over if anything does happen in the future.
Yes. And I know, like I said that earlier, we could go on and on and on. But just using our healthcare system and insurance and navigating, you know, what's the best way to make sure I get what I need, but also not have to file bankruptcy in order to do that. But can we jump in as far as like, we know that navigating the system is such very stressful on just our own mental health, but do you have any tips on how for like our listeners to balance financial stress and kind of the stress management while navigating the system?
Right. I think it is more of knowing how sick you are. Because, yeah, and again, this isn't all against health insurance. There's plenty of issues and ethical problems with self-pay. Like I said, I have a background in holistic medicine where the whole idea is, oh, those doctors are just trying to get rich off you. And it's like, well, you're selling supplements that you're making money off of. Like, who's really, a lot of the systems in healthcare were meant to make it ethical. It's simply that for-profit companies found ways to use the system. So one way, and I'm really bad at drawing, so this will be fun for everyone. Make a bell curve right here. There we go. So most people are right in here. Like,
Nick, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but just for the people that are only listening audio, can you try to explain the visual?
It's a bell. I'm making a bell. It's a very beautiful bell. For those that can't see it, I'm amazing at drawing. It's in 3 dimensions. It's golden color. Okay, I'll stop lying. Anyways, so most people are, and most drugs are tested in the middle, but the edges or where things get skewed is where we all find a lot of our clients, where they try a drug and they have a weird side effect. The doctor says, no, that's not really what happens. Or they try a treatment or they do some therapy and like, nope, it's not working. So in those cases, that's where instead of having your own personal philosophy of, oh, I should use insurance or I should really avoid this terrible capitalistic system, you have to realize, nope, my own personal philosophy doesn't matter. What does matter is what's getting me better. So in those cases, if you have a therapist that your insurance pays for and then some sort of network problem occurs, you still need to see that same therapist. You just have to swallow the cost because that's working for you. Now, there are exceptions. Unfortunately, me as a nurse anesthetist, insurance pays me a lot better than it does a pediatrician who sees a patient every 6 minutes. So in some cases, I realize that there's no ability to pay self-pay. But you have to realize, okay, is this working or is this not working? And that's where I need to progress. At least with self-pay, there's more of an attitude of let's get you better and get you out of here instead of this whole look, let's maintain you. But part of it is understanding, okay, what's wrong with me? What are the fixes? Because I tell patients, hey, you should also exercise. You should start meditating or praying or doing yoga. You should eat better. Or you can do none of that and give more of your money to me because you'll be my patient longer. And I'm fine with either way, but that's the 2 choices you're looking at. So it is more of a clarity of like, you know what, this isn't great healthcare, but it's sufficient and it's economical. Usually it gets most complex for end of life care, where most Americans spend the most healthcare dollars the last 90 days of their lives. Now, granted, I'm a very practical, brutal person. So I'm like, nope, let me die. I didn't work that hard just so I can like live another month and everyone can come visit me at the hospital bed. But like a lot of these, having clarity on a lot of these awkward issues that we don't want to think about, like how sick am I? What do I really need? Is this really worth it? And probably an example you use is like, well, if I don't do this counseling with Kelsey and Amanda, am I going to buy some things at midnight on Amazon to make me feel better that are more expensive than the counseling? So kind of those difficult and somewhat humorous questions.
And I think this is, I just want to say, like, we are not anti-insurance. I have insurance. Like, thankfully, my husband has a really great plan because he works for a really big company. And we use it when we need to, right? Like, I have a kid. I take him for the annual or like the regular checkups and all of that great stuff. I think the thing that came up for me as you were talking is like acute versus like long-term preventative, right? So like I have what I think is the flu. I'm self-diagnosed, right? But like my husband's like, are you going to go to the doctor yet? And I'm like, I don't feel like I need to. And this is where I might like use my supplements or use, my preventative wellness type things. Whereas if I continue to be sick, it's about 7 days. Like if I get to like, I don't know, like 3 weeks or a month, then I'm probably going to call my doctor. Or if I'm having chest pain or like something more acute, absolutely, I'm going to go use my insurance, right? But for that preventative long term, where unfortunately our healthcare system and insurance doesn't see the value in massage, like you said, or chiropractic or Reiki or acupuncture, it really is, what benefit are you trying to get long term versus short term?
Yeah, and I think a sweet spot can be the ways with technology you can message your provider and see if this is a big deal, because you don't want to resort to just Googling everything. Even me as a nurse anesthetist, I think I know so much, and I treated pneumonia with vitamin C for a week until my brother dragged me to the ER, and I had 103-degree fever for that entire week. So I was like, I got this. So it does help to take,
sometimes.
right. It does help to take little steps, just technology, checking in, not going to Google. Sometimes what doesn't work, what should work is like the model where it's self-pay, but it's kind of a corporate low-cost thing, like BetterHelp for therapy. Right now, there's Mind Bloom and Field Trip where you can get ketamine ordered as lozenges to your home instead of coming to see me. Like those should actually be really good alternatives to what we're saying, a hybrid model. In my own experience, I find that it's to end up being the worst of both worlds because it's so profit driven and so poor as far as the actual results. But I think everyone just has to tweak it, like what makes sense for me, what's really working.
Oh God, we could talk forever, but we're running out of time. Nick, thank you so much. Obviously, you're always welcome back with us. As we're closing out here, any last minute summaries or quotes or mantras or anything to share? And then where can listeners find you if they wanted to schedule an appointment or follow you on social?
Right. So it is, like I said earlier, perseverance and patience, realizing the whole system is broken. And it's especially challenging in mental health and these complex disorders because you need to trust your provider. And you can, but you can't trust that your insurance is going to pay for things. But you have to understand that going in so you don't direct that inpatient where it doesn't need to be directed. As far as Ascend Health Center, we do psychiatry, therapy, ketamine infusions, Spravato, TMS, and we do specialize in those complex disorders that can spend all your insurance dollars. And that's at Ascend Health Center. We're on Instagram, on Facebook, or our phone number is 330-754-4844, and you can text it as well. And I'm around on the internet as well if you have any particular questions, because I always love to answer cold questions about these topics too.
That's so awesome. And I know we get listeners from like all over the world. Looking at our statistics from listeners, like we have people in other countries. So just to clarify, Nick is in Copley, Ohio, in the United States. I'm assuming you can only treat in Ohio per.
We do have a few that come in for ketamine infusions from out of state. But as we've both talked about, we've noticed that the best healthcare is local healthcare, where you just drive a few minutes when you actually need something face to face, as great as telehealth is. So.
Thank you, Nick. We appreciate it. And like I said, you're always welcome back.
Absolutely.
For our listeners, make sure you tune back in a couple weeks. We are going to have a guest, Sabrina Lindner, I think I said that correctly, on how being in alignment with your true self creates great well-being. Hey, that's like a really good segue into that one, right?
Yeah, it's like a whole series.
Yeah, look at that. I love it. I love it. That's like the universe making those connections. I love it. All right, y'all, make sure you turn on your notifications, subscribe so that you get the latest notification of new episodes, and comment, give us feedback. What did you like? What didn't you like? And what do you want to hear from us in the future? Take care, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks. Take care. Bye.